Thank you so much, Laurel. And I'm really thrilled to be able to talk to you today about a topic that I'm quite passionate about, flow metrics. We all know there's no shortage of metrics in organizations, be it team metrics, metrics within functions, but the area where most organizations struggle is that it never paints the whole picture for the business. So today I'd like to talk about how, based on our experience with some of our customers, we've seen how flow metrics can provide that all-important business visibility into creating value for your customers. And much like a MRI of your brain, you can focus on specific areas and zero in on bottlenecks and identify where you can improve your processes to achieve value for your customer and your business. I want to start this conversation with this amazing slide. I came across this a few days ago on Twitter, and this is by a gentleman called Skip Engel. And it pretty much encapsulates what is what's captured the imagination of the industry and why the movement from project to a product-based mindset is gathering momentum. A recent Gartner study, I think a few months ago, was suggesting that almost 55% of the organizations are moving towards this journey to be able to view IT with a product mindset. And this hits home. As someone who has worked on projects in the past and seen projects deliver successfully against the triple constraints, around value, cost, and scope, but at the same time, not quite deliver what the customer is wanting. So that's why, to me, the product mindset makes all the difference, because it pivots you from looking at activities and aligning yourself towards what's important for the business. And more importantly, a focus on your customer. Focus on your customer pretty much paves the path for building IT for what the customer needs at that time. And to be able to effectively do that, you need to focus on three things: flow of value flow of value to your customer, and how that maps into your IT products. Closing that feedback loop and being able to listen to your customer and pivoting and changing and continuously improving based on what you're learning and based on those feedback. An all-important thing also is to be able to back it all up with data, so you can measure not only where you need to make improvements, but also be able to see where the improvements you make are actually impacting and how they're moving the needle forward towards a more customer-centric approach to IT. The bit that's sort of missing sometimes, and using data, especially for the latter two, for closing the feedback loop and to continuously improve, you need to be able to understand how value flows to the customer, not in functional silos, but end to end. And unfortunately, what happens is this is where business and IT are at odds. The business looks at an application, versus when we look at what's happening on the IT side, we look at it as projects. We look at it as different types of work at a team level. So we don't quite see see this work with the same lens. And to be able to bridge, we need to be able to bridge that gap. And this is where value stream management comes in, which originates in manufacturing, but provides that, that focus to create value end to end, not just in parts of the organization. If we take a retail example, if we think about a online experience for a customer, from the point they go to a website to the point they purchase, they go through quite a lot of activities, and value stream sort of maps those set of activities, that end-to-end set of activities that a customer goes through to get value, and this can be in the form of a product or a service. Um, if if you look at any value stream these days, though, IT systems are core to it, and they drive value to these customer value streams. So when we look at applying a product mindset to IT, we need to look at it from the IT systems perspective. And this is where the term product value stream comes in. When we apply value stream management, we apply it to software products, and it spans end to end, starts with the customer, but very specifically to what we're delivering through that software product to an internal or an external customer. And this last bit, internal, external customer, is quite important. If we look at that retail example again, you look at that e-commerce website, there are quite a lot of IT systems that drives that website. You're going to have inventory management system, which is going to look at how many items you really have in stock. You're going to have logistics. When order is placed, how is that going to be delivered? The order processing system itself, on orders and returns and so forth. So every one of these internal applications drive value to that external application, which is your e-commerce website. And each of these systems are managed by teams within your organization. And these teams use a lot of tools to be able to do their work. So those tools need to be maintained too. With an IT, you need to be able to manage these tools as value streams as well. If you have your teams who develop your inventory system and your order purchasing system, and if the developers work on a tool like Jira, you need to be able to, you're bound to have team that manage Jira, maintain it, manage their upgrades, make any changes to workflows, fix any defects on it. So and it needs to be managed as a product as well, because if that tool is not fit for purpose, or is not helping the developers do their work, it impacts the work on the systems that they build, and in the end, the business products that that derive value from these internal applications. So if you think about that, you have different types of customers within or for your product value streams. You can have the external customers for external facing products, which is probably the most intuitive one, but you do have internal customers who can be, it can just be another value stream which is deriving value from your from your application, and you have the tools which your developers and specialists are deriving value from, and is important to be managed and to be architected for flow. So all of these constitute a product value stream, and each of these need to be looked at end to end and optimized. So what does that mean how do we measure flow across each of these product value stream? We all know how complex it is to build software or to maintain an existing software, a third-party software. You go through the usual create, ideate, release, and operate phases, but at the end of the day, it's always about the customer. You put the customer first. And all of this translates into quite a large number of activities. These are activities that are carried out by different teams in different tools, performed, and people who perform different roles. And your success of keeping and maintaining the software depends on this tool landscape and how well this tool landscape operates. And the number of tools is quite high, and it's important to be able to manage that. The other important thing is, because all of these roles and teams work in these tools hold the ground truth about flow. Looking at the data within these tools, you can understand and get more information about flow of value for your value streams. And that's quite important to note here. So why isn't, so it sounds simple, right? So why is it difficult to do that? Why aren't more and more organizations able to harness that data and get that insight that they need? One of the main reasons is just the number of tools. There can be quite a few. Each of these tools can have their own nuances. You want to be able to provide your teams the best of breed tools so they can perform they can perform well and use them for the work that they need to do and increase productivity. Acquisitions and partner ecosystems add to that complexity because that takes away the control you have on some of these tools. So you might have tools that you can't get information from, and that sort of adds a little bit more complexity. Even if you had standard tools, the way teams use these tools could be completely different. They might use different workflows. They might use the same workflow in different ways. And that can also add a little bit of complexity. And finally, you can have teams who work in completely different frameworks. You can have one team who is probably experimenting or starting to use SAFe. There might be others who are using Kanban, and you might have parts of the value stream who are still using waterfall. And to be able to pull information from all of these different tools and still be able to relate to how teams work with these tools can be quite complex. And if you think about the number of products an organization can have, large organizations can have as many as 700 to 1,000 products within IT. And that sheer number sort of gives you a sense of why this is so difficult. So what you need is some way to apply a common language or a model to help you interpret flow in such a way that it doesn't impede the way teams work, but at the same time be able to elevate the necessary information so you can have a more relevant conversation, yet abstract out some of these complexities. And this is where flow framework comes in. Dr. Mick Kirsten wrote this book almost to the date, I think, a year ago when this was released. The book is called Project to Product, and it's resonating with quite a lot of businesses. It's actually sold over 20,000 copies so far. And Mick put this framework in place, and the thoughts around flow framework is, and all of the concepts are geared towards bridging that gap between business and IT. And it's done through these metrics, which these 5 metrics, and abstracting out some of these complexities to what is relevant, and most importantly, tying back to business results. What flow metrics do is they tie back to business value and move you from a place where you're looking at activities to measuring outcomes, and looking at the feedback loop and helping you improve the decisions you make, and be able to continually improve. So how does this work? How would you go about it? The first thing is the sheer complexity around tools that we talked about briefly. If you looked at all the work that goes into these tools, it's quite a lot. It maps into quite a lot of work type. It can be epic, stories, features, whatever that is in those individual constructs. What you need is to not lose that granularity, because the teams need this granularity to be able to do their work effectively. But at the same time, what you want to be able to do is extract out what's relevant for a high-level conversation with the business, so you're not bogging them down with the complexity. So flow framework enables you to do that by abstracting that out. What flow framework does is it classifies all of this work into 4 categories. The first one is any new business value that is created. It can be created in any form. It could be an epic, a story, or whatever that is. But at the end of the day, any new value created is important to the business, and that needs to be flagged out, because that's where the revenues or the ROIs are coming from, or the value proposition for that internal product is coming from. In addition to that, you need to pay attention to anything that is preventing value from being eroded, any quality improvements that you need to do, any fixes that you need to do, because you want to make sure that value you provide to your customer is maintained. The third one, which is slightly obscure, is the business needs to understand themes that deal with revenue protection. Anything that could lead to things like security, things like compliance, governance, that can lead to that if you don't think about them, can lead to fines or lead to reduction in your brand value, and those are important. And at times, the business will need to want to prioritize those over, let's say, adding new value to their customers. GDPR, for example, when they had a specific timeline, a lot of businesses focus their efforts on making sure that that's done and completed in the right time frame. So that's important. Any of those themes need to be surfaced up so the business and the IT teams can have a open conversation about it. The last one is probably the most obscure, and that's debt. And this is not just technical debt. It's any conversation around how you can improve flow and anything that will remove impediments for future delivery. This is extremely important, and it's a conversation that never happens, but the business needs to care, because that can have a huge impact on how you deliver against the other types of work like new business value or improvements or defects or risks. So it's extremely important to elevate the conversation of debt higher up. So we factor that in prioritization of work that goes into your value stream. Now that we have 4 themes and 4 sort of work items or flow items, as flow framework calls, when we think about conversations, what's next? The next step to identifying where your bottlenecks are is to know where your work is waiting and where you need to add more efficiencies. And in order to do that, you need to look at the states. Again, this is an example of one of our customers' value stream. And as you can see, this is the number of states transitions that they go through. And there are so many variations that to be able to find out where work is waiting and where it's not is quite difficult. And for that reason, it's important that we abstract this as well, because there can be different interpretations for the same state, and you need to be able to ascertain when work is waiting versus when actual work is being done. So flow framework allows you to do that by abstracting that out into these 4 key states. What you want to be able to do, you don't need to change the workflow of your of your tools, but be able to tag them in such a way that you know when work comes into your value stream, which is new. At what point is active work being done? Someone is actively working on it. And at what point is work waiting for either feedback from business, or maybe it's an approval or whatever that is. You need to be able to identify those. And the last one is you need to know when work is done. And done not in terms of when it's when code is complete, but done to a point where the customer can now draw value from that work that you have done. Once you get to that point where you're able to identify what your core flow items are within your value stream and what the states are, you have everything you need to be able to calculate these flow metrics. The first one is flow distribution, and this is one of the most important ones because it gives you a sense for everything that you completed within that value stream. How did you divide that across those flow items, and gives you a sense of how things are being prioritized. So at certain times, you might prioritize defects more versus features, at times depth and risk, and it gives you that sense of what proportion of your finite resources you're using for each of those flow items. And it helps, again, with prioritization in future. Flow load talks about your WIP. What's in flight for your teams, and how much work is there sitting there. And this can be a combination of active and waiting. And it gives you a sense of where your looking deeper into this can also give you a sense of where the bottlenecks might be. Velocity talks about how much value you have delivered, not based on things like story points, but based on how many items you have delivered. And the reason for that is every work item you deliver has a value associated to it that the customer can consume, and it's important to know what that is and how many value adds you provided to the business at any time, and gives you a sense of what your throughput is. The next one is flow time, and this gives you a sense of all the items that you complete. How long is it taking from the point it's been accepted into your value stream to the point you've delivered that to the customer. This is not just dev time. This is everything from the time the product teams spend on any analysis, any investigations, design time, UX time, anytime it's waiting for approvals, and pretty much to the point where it's now available for the customer to consume, and it gives you a um, broad spectrum of activities that goes through to get that work done. And finally, efficiency. And this is probably one of the most difficult to track as well. And we're seeing that with some of our customers because it entirely depends on how you track your active and wait times. Efficiency basically looks at, out of the time that it took for you to churn out these features and defects and risk and debt, how much of this was actually when someone was working on it, and how much of this time was spent waiting, and can give you a sense for how you can target specific bottlenecks and improve on them. So all of these metrics are great, but they mean nothing without looking at the context, which is the business results. If you don't look at the business results, you can pretty much interpret these metrics any way you want, and you might take a few wrong turns. It needs to have that context of business results associated with it, and you need to see it side by side, and interpret them side by side. Flow framework provides recommendations on what business results you should look at. The first two are probably the more intuitive one. You need to understand what value business sees and business expects out of your product value streams. For an external product, this can be dollars, ROI, revenues, and ARR. But for internal products, it can be anything from adoption rate, usage rate. It could be for a tool that is extremely important to drive your business products, and its uptime is important. It could be something like uptime as well. So whatever is the value that that product provides needs to be identified, so you can look at the metrics with that context in mind. Cost is important as well, because you need to understand what you're putting in for the results that you're getting out of this particular application or this particular product value stream. And cost, not just in terms of number of FTEs but also licenses and any other fixed cost associated with it. That's the cost. You can see that as a total cost of ownership of that particular product. So you have a good sense of how much you're putting into that product value stream to be able to compare with the value that you're deriving. Quality is important for most IT applications because it has a direct relationship to value. So Flow Framework calls that out, and this can be in any way that applies to a particular value stream or an application. It could be uptime, it could be number of escape defects, whatever makes sense for that particular individual value stream, but that gives you a sense of the value, the quality for that particular product. Happiness is probably a new one that a lot of you may not have heard of, and that in this context, happiness talks about the happiness of the teams involved in this product value stream: the developers, the scrum masters, the product managers, the testers, the support engineers, because the team who deliver to the customer and deliver that product can give you a good sense of what's happening within within that work construct, and could be a leading indicator of problems within that product. So it's absolutely important to be able to track that, and not many organizations do, but as soon as they start tracking it, they see quite a lot of results from that, and it's quite an important one. Now that we've looked at what flow framework is about, we talked about the abstractions and how sort of the metrics and the results sort of gel together. How do we get started? So now let's say we've decided that, yes, now it all makes sense. I would like to apply that. The first thing to remember is you don't have to be actively going through a product transformation to get started. And at the same time, you don't have to have every one of your products identified to get started. It helps for sure. But if that's not the case, and most organizations are just not there yet, they're probably early in this journey, it can be grassroots. It can start bottom up. The key thing you need to remember is start with the customer and take a product mindset to it. It doesn't matter how the organization is set up, what hierarchies exist. If you're able to apply a product model on top of it, you will still be able to get the insights that you need, and get flow metrics with that customer focus that a product mindset sort of talks about. Once you find a value stream, and usually a lot of our customers look for a very core IT value stream to start with, because they have quite a lot of control in that at that point. So starting there, once you have identified one, the first step is to model it. And what I'll talk about what that means in a minute, but essentially be able to understand how value flows through that particular product. And once you have that, you can set yourself to identifying your flow items and start measuring. I talked a bit about modeling your product value stream, and what that means is, how does value flow for this value stream? A good place to start is defects. It's quite easier and easily understood as well. Where do defects get raised? How do they get worked on? Or do incidents go to a particular team? Do problems get created as features and go into your sprint? How does that work within that particular value stream? Start mapping that down. It's important to put the tools that hold that information there as well, because that then enables you to understand where you need to look for information. Make sure you map any manual processes during that modeling, because that's probably where some of your bottlenecks are and wait states are. Also important to identify any partner dependencies or vendor dependencies, because that can be another area where you might not have visibility, and it might be one of the themes that you might choose for continuous improvement, like one of our customers did. You may not have all of the flow items actively identified within your tools. That's okay. Start with what you have, and start with the tools that you can to be able to start working through and measuring flow metrics, and it will ensure that you can then actively expand that across and create that flow metrics dashboard that you need. What I wanted to do was talk through 3 stories of customers who have gone through this journey and how they have used flow metrics to identify where they can put their efforts for improvements. So the first story is this shared services team. And one of the business complaints was they were not churning out work or features specifically soon enough. So it's about 8 or 10 people in this team, and so business decided we need to give them one additional headcount. And it they were expecting that this is going to be a developer. Clearly, we need another developer so we can do more work. This was around the time when they had started mapping their value stream. And one of the things we immediately noted was, even though the time it takes for them to finish work is about 9-ish, 10 days on an average, the load is immense. It's way too much that's coming in. When we looked a bit more into what's the WIP on this particular team, we noticed that work coming in as requests, they sit there for a long time before they're even picked up and triaged. This team only had one BA, and this one BA was quite bogged down because they did not have enough time to go through everything that was coming in and be able to pick the ones, prioritize them, and then accept it into the value stream for work. And that told them that maybe what they're looking for is a BA and not a developer. So they're now looking to hire a business analyst. So and that's the kind of insight that they wouldn't have gotten if they hadn't sort of seen these metrics. The other story is about this customer who had a fairly good flow velocity. They should have been fairly happy with the way things are going, but the team happiness, they were measuring happiness of the teams, and it was consistently low, and there were quite a lot of complaints about context switching. So when we looked at we focused just on features. When we looked at their flow metrics, we noticed that they've got quite a lot of load. Their cycle times are about 10-ish, which seems about right. But if you compare the amount of time it takes to finish work and the load they have, they should actually be churning more, because their efficiency is showing as 100%, which sort of means that they have literally no wait states. As we dug a bit deeper, what we realized was there was quite a lot of work items stuck in active state, more than 120, which doesn't make sense for a team of 8 to 10 people to have that much in flight. You can't really be working on 120 items at the same time for those 10 people. So that sort of helped them realize that maybe they're not tagging their wait states properly. And that's sort of a process improvement they need to do, even though it sounds amazing that they have a 94% efficiency. That's actually a false positive, and maybe they need to look at that. And again, something that they would have never focused on if they hadn't been able to see this and analyzed what these numbers were telling them. The last story is this customer who rely on vendors for parts of development within their value stream. And the usual complaint was, we never know when things get done, and there's no real visibility, and the business was unsure what's going on and where is work, what is the status of all the work that's going on. And if we looked, and sure enough, they were quite early in their journey to implementing Flow Framework, but almost immediately they saw that all they see are features in the load, all they see are defects in their distribution, because that is the only item that they have control over within their organization. They see quite a lot of load for features because the business analysts do the work to write out the stories and so forth and pass it on to the vendor, but there's no visibility on what gets done. The other thing they realized was they couldn't quite tag risks and debt, because again, the visibility hinders them to be able to effectively measure how well they're doing. So in terms of what they're planning on doing next is the first thing is work with the business, and they've now got funding to be able to add integration between those vendor systems and their system in such a way that they can get a bit more information on how work is getting done within that value stream. And again, something they probably wouldn't have focused enough on, and definitely wouldn't have gotten funding for, had they not been able to back that up with the data that they were seeing. So for us, looking at some of our experience with all of our customers, I think the key takeaway was it's okay to start ground up. None of these organizations were actively in a huge project transformation, but they were able to identify value streams where they were able to apply a product mindset and look at it from a customer perspective. Modeling the value stream provided them quite a lot of insights around what is the manual work that is going on around vendors, and that in itself was quite a great achievement, because it gave them insights on what they should be looking at. Measure as soon as possible. Anyone who has developed any kind of dashboard will know that the sooner you measure, the more data you can collect. You can always recalibrate the data, but the sooner you measure, even if you think it is slightly incomplete, you don't have all the flow items, that's okay. But starting sooner rather than later is important, because you get value out of it quicker. But at the same time, being able to use that data to devise how you add continuous improvement and be able to measure how the improvements are relating back to your business results. And that's the thing, business results are key. Without that, you would probably go down the wrong path. So those were our learnings from our experiences so far. We're still learning, and I hope that in a few months' time, we'll be able to come back and talk to you about a bit more about what we're learning and how organizations have been able to use flow metrics to forward their journey towards a product-oriented IT. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover today. If any of you are interested in understanding how you can model your product value stream, we have a free 1-hour consulting session that we can go through with you. If you're interested, we've got a link here, and you're more than welcome to sign up. That's pretty much I wanted to cover. Laurel?
Great, thank you so much, Laksh. And just a reminder for everyone, if you do have questions, please type them in the GoToWebinar control panel. We had a couple questions come in. The first one is, should flow metrics be compared across various product value streams?
That's a great question. Flow metrics in themselves, the way they are derived, they're quite unique to individual value streams. What one product might classify as feature may not quite be the same for another one. The states and workflows that one value stream uses might not quite be the same. And most importantly, the business results are not going to be the same. So it makes sense to compare flow metrics to business results, but within an individual value stream rather than across. However, where it can be useful to look at multiple value streams is to learn how other teams have the improvements that other teams have seen, and be able to apply that across, because learnings can be applied across value streams. So if you would like to compare, I would suggest compare the learnings versus the metrics themselves.
Great, thank you. The next question we got was how do we measure happiness?
That's a great question. Um, Within Tasktop, we have an employee survey which goes out. We do an NPS survey, which is a single question. Would you recommend someone to work within this product team that you're in, and capture some comments from them, and that gives us quite a lot of insights. In fact, it's one of the key OKRs for our organization as a whole. Other organizations that we have worked with, they look at other scores. They might have the internal surveys that they look at. And what we would recommend, though, to be able to use that for flow framework is to be able to have something that runs on a cadence rather than a once a year survey. Perhaps every month or maybe quarterly is more appropriate for a survey like this, but something that captures that more often than a yearly cadence.
Thank you. The next question we have is, can you apply flow metrics to services-based value streams like ways of working?
Yeah, so there are merits to applying flow framework to a non-product or non-IT application value streams, because you can certainly learn more about where your weight states are, no matter what the value stream is. The key thing to remember when you are applying this in a very services oriented value stream is you might not have the notion of defects or debt, um, um, or risk. So to be able to just remove those out from the equation, but you would still be able to have some notion of features depending on what you're delivering to your customer. Just to bear in mind that not all flow items might be relevant, but certainly lots to gain by mapping your states, because weight states is what causes bottleneck, and you can learn quite a lot within any value stream, product or otherwise.
Great, thank you. Next question is, how do you integrate team metrics with flow metrics and portfolio governance metrics? Do we need to align them all?
So that's a great question. Flow metrics does not in any way imply that you do away with any of your other metrics, but it enables you to ask the right questions. When we looked at some of the examples that we talked about, we looked at some of the flow metrics as a starting point, which gave us clues on where to look. But the actual information that we got was from team metrics that they were collecting already. Part of it was provided as part of the flow metrics, but we went into the individual work to see and get the granular data. And so to me, they both are complementary. Similarly, when you look at high-level governance metrics, that and flow metrics are also complementary, because at the end of the day, products feed into major strategic themes and within the organization, so they do roll up. So again, the objectives of the higher level metrics will trickle down as business results when you consider your flow metrics for your product value streams. And in that way, I see them being complementary as well. So all what flow framework does is adds that layer to be able to view the value stream end to end, and be able to leverage the other metrics to derive the insights that we need, and especially to apply the continuous improvement.
Great, thank you, Aksh. And this is our last question for today. If you do have more, again, we will be sure to reach out and follow up. But the question is there one flow metric that is most important or one that's best to start with?
Um, each of those metrics in isolation don't seem to paint um, the entire picture. So you might be able to look at just flow distribution, but it might not give you a sense for how much time is it taking to complete those. It's probably okay to have more features versus defect, but if it's taking too long, then there are different bottlenecks you would be looking for, because the core reason to look at flow metrics is to be able to improve flow. And in order to do that, you need to look at them together, and again, in relation to business results. Having said that, when you start down this journey, you would notice that it takes some time to start getting realistic and accurate data for metrics like flow time and flow efficiency, because it does need work to be completed to a certain extent to be able to see the entire picture. So you will notice that during your early days, you look a lot more at metrics like distribution and load, and sometime velocity, but mostly distribution and load as a starting point. And as you start collecting more data, you will get more insights from. Basically, what I was trying to say was, initial days, you'll probably rely on load and distribution until your data collects to a point where um, you can get reliable data out of your flow time and efficiency. So from that perspective, you might be looking at some of them initially and then looking at the holistic picture afterwards.